think a lot of the friends distanced themselves from the case. In the beginning, I think they were talking to Jeff and they were trying to help, but in the distance, later, I think everybody was afraid, especially the young ones. Now, I've spoken to a couple of the young girls and to one of the parents of one of the young girls, and personally to Rianne Garcia, Lindsay's closest and dearest friend. They all went into the Saanich police shortly after the murder, like within a couple of days, voluntarily. Nobody dragged them in. They just went. And they were treated with disrespect and left there thinking, I'm never going back to those cops.
You say treated with disrespect. Can you give us an example?
Well, we're talking about the same police officer. I won't use his name. The same police officer that interviewed these girls. And he said to one girl who went in with her mother, he said, give me your phone. And she said, why? He said, I said, give me your phone. And then there were other smart comments made. I'm not going to get into it. And then Rianne, she was scared to death after she went in. They believed that she knew something. They followed her for almost a year. And I don't believe for a minute that she was involved in anything.
Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Jim Fitzgerald, how are you, sir?
Jim Fitzgerald and Fitz, the same person, are doing fine, Ray. And thank you for that intro. And in our ongoing discussion of the murder of Lindsay Busiak, we have another guest on tonight familiar with that case. Tell us some about her, Ray.
Well, we're going to dive tonight into part 2 of our multi-part investigation into the unsolved murder of Lindsay Busiak. We're going to focus heavily on victimology, and I know that kind of rubs people the wrong way, but that's one of the most important aspects of any crime, and we're going to look at the inner circle that surrounded her in 2008. Now, Gail, we're just going to say Gail at this point. We're not going to mention your last name, Gail. But you spent 16 years intensively covering this case and running a website, murderonthedesouza.com. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I had been involved. I was a realtor with RE/MAX for over 30 years. So when Lindsay was murdered, I took it quite hard. A lot of us did. But I couldn't I couldn't walk away from it. I got so wrapped up in it, and it just became my passion. And so I got to know Jeff, and I posted on his website quite often, like a lot of other people did.
Jeff is Lindsay's father.
Lindsay's dad, yes.
Yes.
And in the 2020, I decided to start my own website, which I did, but I didn't allow postings. I didn't want going back and forth and lies and people's opinions. I just thought I'd keep it an information blog. And so that's what I've done for the last 6 years. I've kept it information. I do my best to keep it honest, as straightforward as I can. I know I've made a few mistakes along the way, maybe, but I'd say I'm maybe 80% accurate. I know one of the police officers said to me, Gail, you've got a couple of little mistakes on there. And I said, well, tell me what they are and I'd be glad to correct them. He said, no, we can't do that. So it's not perfect.
We're not aiming for perfection. We're just aiming to bring out everything. Perfection will be for the courtroom. Right. And we aim for perfection on Cold Red, but we bring our guest on to tell us what they know. If it's firsthand, if it's secondhand, we'll do our best to report it that way. No one is perfect. Certainly Ray and I, well, Ray isn't. And we try to keep that in line there with Cold Red. But so that's okay. So interesting that the police officer, that's from Saanich PD, correct?
Right, yeah.
Would have told you there are some mistakes on it, but they wouldn't tell you what they are. Okay.
That's correct. And I should say, too, that my blog is my blog. I take full responsibility. I know a lot of people think it's Jeff Buziak's, Lindsay's dad's blog. He has nothing to do with it. I do all the writing. I take responsibility.
Well, Gail, after 16 years studying this case, there's probably nobody other than the police that know better than you. Maybe you may even know better than them. I have no idea. But what is the biggest single misconception that people have about Lindsay's social circle in your eyes?
Well, in my opinion, I think the misconception, at least it's only my opinion, This Calgary drug bust, to me, is just a red herring. And I think we've been listening. It's sad because for years we've been listening to the police speak on the media and say things like, well, she met up in Calgary with this guy, but I've never seen an ounce of evidence to support that ever happened. Never. And in 2018, Sergeant Chris Hartley spoke to the media, and he said, if we had an opportunity to go to the Crown Council, we would, but we haven't, which means they didn't even have the evidence in 2018 to take to Crown Council. That was unbelievable. 10 years and not even their file has not gone to Crown Council.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. Is it because they don't have the evidence, or is it because they have egg on their face and they don't want the truth coming out? That would be my guess.
Well, we did mention that we were going to focus somewhat on victimology a little bit here, and hopefully you can help us with that. So with that said, looking back at your earlier interviews and conversations that you've had with a lot of people involved in this, who do you believe knew Lindsay the best in the final months of her life?
Well, Jason, of course.
That was her boyfriend?
That was her boyfriend. They've been together about a year.
Her co-worker at the real estate agency.
Correct.
And the son of the woman who was Lindsay's boss.
Oh, Shirley Salo, yes. Manager of the office.
Okay.
Have anybody else besides Jason and Shirley? Anybody else that you could think of?
Well, she had an abundance of friends. Her friends loved her. They adored her. I have never heard a negative word spoken about the girl in all the people I've talked to, newspaper article I read. Nobody has ever said it. I've only heard good words. And the one that really impacted me the most was something that was said in the newspaper on Saanich News on February the 8th. Her friend Deanna said, Lindsay was a ray of sunshine, a beautiful person inside and out. She has an amazing smile and tons of energy. She made the funniest faces, hated dairy foods, carbs, and bad drivers, and she couldn't parallel park with her seatbelt on. You could find Lindsay in a sea of people with a contagious laugh. Most of all, she had a reputation for trustworthiness. Now, that's just one statement from one friend. There was tons of them, and they were all positive and loving.
And that's just 6 days after her murder.
Yeah, February 8th. Wait, that statement was made in the Saanich News. And that, coincidentally, that girl made that statement. She was the one who Lindsay was supposed to be going to her stag at night in Vancouver that night, but couldn't make it because of the clients that came into town.
The clients who are still unknown, still anonymous, used the burner phone to trick her into going to this high-priced home to sale,
Yes.
That was for sale, and then murdered her. They and or others murdered her in the upstairs bedroom late that afternoon. Was Deanna, she made that statement to the police a week or so after the homicide, made to the media, a newspaper article.
I would think yes.
But I'm hoping she was also interviewed by the police.
I have no idea. I've never spoken to Deanna.
You mentioned, or we've had heard mention through some of our podcasts here, that after this happened to Lindsay, there was a pattern among people that kind of distanced themselves from this case. Did you notice that? And if you did, were they the same age and background of Lindsay? What was their relationship to Lindsay?
I think a lot of the friends distanced themselves from the case. In the beginning, I think they were talking to Jeff and they were trying to help. But in the distance, later, I think everybody was afraid, especially the young ones. Now, I've spoken to a couple of the young girls and to one of the parents of one of the young girls, and personally to Rianne Garcia, Lindsay's closest and dearest friend. They all went into the Saanich police shortly after the murder, like within a couple of days, voluntarily. Nobody dragged them in. They just went. And they were treated with disrespect and left there thinking, I'm never going back to those cops.
You say treated with disrespect. Can you give us an example?
Well, we're talking about the same police officer. I won't use his name. The same police officer that interviewed these girls. And he said to one girl who went in with her mother, he said, give me your phone. And she said, Why? He said, I said, give me your phone. And then there were other smart comments made. I'm not going to get into it. And then Rianne, she was scared to death after she went in. They believed that she knew something. They followed her for almost a year. And I don't believe for a minute that she was involved in anything.
You know,
And
you said
other friends, the same thing. And I don't want to get into the other one, but they were not treated well.
you mentioned that some of these friends and associates that they were afraid to speak publicly about what was going on, or even going back into the police. Do you know why or what they were specifically afraid of to do that?
No idea.
Of course, one of their best friends was just brutally murdered, stabbed 4 times. I mean, this is the obvious, response here, and that had to be part of it. But it also may be if you're getting treated rudely by a certain police officer, detective, whatever, when you voluntarily show up in the police department, now you have someone else of whom to be afraid.
They were shocked. They were shocked. They went in to try and help, and they weren't talking about the Calgary drug bust.
And this is a treasure. Sometimes people get killed and no friends want to talk to police at all.
Yeah.
They get quiet. They don't say a word. And you have to really get subpoenas, perhaps, and to get phone records. Here comes a number of people. I'm not sure exactly the number. Within, you said, a few days to a week, voluntarily walking in. This is what victimology is all about. And we've defined it on Cold Red before, but it's basically learning everything about your victim. That's why it's called victimology, and which could possibly help explain why they were murdered. And of course, that has to do with friends and family and workplace and school place, whatever it may be. And here's multiple friends walking in the Saanich Police Department, and at least from what you're hearing, back in the day, they were
Scared right out the door.
they're. I can understand them being afraid of the person who wielded the knife, person or persons, but you don't want to have your potential witnesses who can better explain the whole victimology of the victim being
Well,
also afraid of the
weren't they
police.
like
That's a bad
secondary?
combination.
Yeah, weren't they like secondary victims? Lindsay's friends were. They were
They
Sure.
would be
victims.
considered secondary victims,
Sure.
yes.
Yeah, and they should
Yeah.
have been treated with respect, given a glass of water. Just treated with respect.
You know, you talk about this cloud of silence that has kind of been hanging over this case almost since the beginning. From your interactions, what does that feel like to you? Does it feel like fear? Does it feel like fatigue, guilt by association maybe, or is it people just looking to move on?
I think it's a bit of both. I think there's fear in some of those girls. Some of them have families now, and just they're too scared. They want to protect their own family, and who can blame them? I have no fear. I don't give a damn. Come and get me. But I just feel that, you've talked about Lindsay putting her toe in the door and on the periphery of criminality. But I believe that criminality began the minute she was introduced to Jason Zalo, the minute he introduced her to his family. That's where it all began. She had been happy for months, so she loved her career. Everybody said she was happy. And then all of a sudden, bang, within 6 months, their relationship, things were going sideways.
Do you think her father came on Cold Red back in January and said that his daughter, Lindsay, had told him when she went to visit him out of the area that she was going to break up with Jason? Yet there is some dispute about that issue. Do you know anything more about that between the girlfriends Rianne or anyone else? Do you have any insight on that part?
They were all saying that she was going to break up with Jason.
Okay.
Rianne, I had lunch with Rianne a number of times. We have lots of phone calls. We went on the Memorial Walk for Justice quite a few years in a row. She was dedicated, and she loved Lindsay. And she said she was leaving Jason. She didn't love him like she loved Matt. She was leaving him. And even all the expensive gifts he bought her for Christmas that year, 07, she didn't want them. So
Now, we want to be careful here because she wanted to break up with Jason. Doesn't mean he was in the bedroom that night or that house
no, absolutely
until
not.
afterwards. But again, compound particular story and how it all lays out.
It's not the killer.
It's,
Definitely.
You know,
Does he know
you
what
you
happened?
talked, Gail. You talked about. I asked you earlier about misconceptions, and you mentioned the Calgary drug bust. Did you ever get the feeling, or did anyone ever indicate to you that law enforcement was looking in the wrong direction?
I think they were looking in the wrong direction, the police, from the very beginning, and who else would have steered them to the Calgary drug bust? If it wasn't Jason and his family who said, well, Lindsay went to Calgary to visit her dad. I mean, I call it deflection. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I see it as a red herring.
and remind our listeners who was arrested or how many people in this Calgary drug bust, and when exactly was it?
There was only 2 that were arrested at the end of January. The rest weren't arrested till later on in the year, different times. The investigation was under investigation. I think it was November when the person who ratted them out made that call to the police, and that's where they took over.
So I just want to be clear on our timeline. You're talking you're talking November, December of 2007?
November 2007, that's when the burner phone was purchased. That's when the call was made to the police. And I believe it was made to the RCMP locally to inform on the Delcazar crew that there was a shipment of cocaine headed to Calgary.
And remind us, Calgary is how far from Saanich?
It's an hour and a half flight. No, it's not. It's not even 9. It's more like 50 minutes.
And that's where
12-hour drive.
And that's where Lindsay went to visit her father the week or so before she was murdered, correct?
I believe it was December 16th, 17th, 18th, somewhere in there.
Okay,
or no, 14th, 15th, 16th.
All right, so a month or 2 beforehand. Okay. So yeah, Calgary directly, indirectly plays a role in this, the arrest there. And the 2 people arrested, do they have Saanich connections?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
They were living in Calgary at that time, but they were Saanich. They were Eldrickson Delcazar was the main guy, and he lived in Victoria. He was a drug dealer. Yeah.
And
but I do not believe for a minute Lindsay went to visit him when she was in Calgary. But I don't know for sure.
So, and we've intimated this before, or it's been intimated to us in earlier episodes, but did someone think that Lindsay perhaps provided some sort of information which resulted in this arrest occurring back in December, and then her being killed basically 6 weeks or so, 8 weeks
Very
later?
possible that someone thought she was the rat. Absolutely. And if that was the case, well, Vid Acevedo, he was a good friend. He was part of that group. He wasn't arrested, but he was part of the Delcazar group. And it was a couple of days after Lindsay was murdered that Vid was on the warpath. Vid was looking for the Zalos. He was out to get them. We don't know why. But the letter that was received by somebody told us that Ziggy Matheson, he was a Zalos friend. Ziggy Matheson was trying to set up a meeting with his group to protect the Zalos from Vid. The only thing that made sense to me was, well, either Vid found out that Lindsay wasn't the informant and they had killed her, or Vid and his group found out that the Zalos are pointing the finger at them for murdering Lindsay when they had nothing to do with it. I don't see it could go either way.
Did these drug arrests result in a conviction and a lengthy prison sentence?
Erickson Delcazar, I believe he got 3 years. The other fellow, 1.5 years.
Not exactly lengthy, but
that's
yeah.
not a whole lot of time.
Good behavior, they're out. And
not considering the $80 million, no.
No, it's not a whole lot of time. Well, let me ask you this, Gail. You're running this case now, okay? You are in charge. If you were to identify 3 of the most important people that need to be re-interviewed, who would they be and why?
Jason Zalo, Shirley Zalo, Ryan Zalo.
Why?
Because they were closest to Lindsay. They knew her every move, every waking move in those a couple of days, 48 hours prior to her murder. Somebody had to get her to that house. And I don't believe for a minute it had to be, okay, let's say the Saanich police said, we've reached a roadblock. We're against a brick wall. That's what they told Dateline. We need help. So they go on Dateline, and the Dateline experts all end the show by saying it was somebody very close to Lindsay. Somebody in the same business, maybe even someone in the same office, but somebody she knew that she was very close to. Less than a week later, the Saanich police go out and publicly make an announcement that they've cleared the Zalos. The Zalos are innocent. They've cooperated fully. And we're going, geez, you hit a roadblock a week ago and you told Dateline. So, no, but that didn't make any sense. 1 week later, that they were clearing them. Yeah, that
Well,
it just
those three that you just mentioned, have you encountered, or are you aware of contradictions that they've made that have never been fully explained?
there's just too many. 25 different versions of events by Jason himself.
Can you give me an example?
Well, Jason's story in the beginning, what he was going to the D'Souza house to deliver papers for Lindsay to sign. There was no papers for Lindsay to sign. In fact, Sergeant Chris Horsley, in I believe it was 2010, he went out to the media and he said, yeah, Jason was going to the house because he had papers to deliver to Lindsay that needed to be signed. That turned out not to be true. Sergeant Chris Horsey went out to the media and said Lindsay was not apprehensive about the showing at all. Yeah, all her other friends said she was. I don't know. There's just so many of them.
She had some, yeah, her intuition obviously was telling her something, but and apparently so was her boyfriend Jason's, and apparently he was supposed to show up at some point and help her, but when he did show up after she was dead, he's dressed like in a hoodie and very informal, which is not how most realtors.
At 10 o'clock that night, but he was going to protect Lindsay. I don't know why he couldn't have thrown on a jacket and pair of dress jeans. I don't know. But showing up in, like Lisa said, in a hoodie. He was in a hoodie in the reenactment and he was also in a hoodie on the Friday night.
From what I understand, and Jim, help me with this, and Gail, I want you to help me too. And going back and rethinking about what was told to us in previous podcasts by different individuals, was the fact that Lindsay was concerned about this showing so much that she said something to the young woman who was working. I think she was the receptionist at the
receptionist, yes, and also to a couple of realtors that were upstairs in the work area, and Cal Faber. I mean, Cal's a terrific guy. Now, that's a guy who's got guts. He's a realtor. He came forward to say, look, I offered to go to the house with Lindsay. She said, no, I'm good. Jason's going to be there. Right. He used to be an RCMP officer, and he was concerned. But she assured him Jason would be there.
Yes, that's what I recall being said. So that's very contradictory to what is being put out by the Saanich PD. Very contradictory. Well, we could probably talk just about this whole time, but why don't we change gears and make a move into Rihanna Garcia?
Yes.
Or is that, and you spent a lot of time with her.
I did.
What stood out to you most about what she remembered about this situation?
She was very leery of meeting me at first. I kind of tried to be her friend. It took quite a while. I was on one of the walks, and then the second walk, she used to walk her little dog. We used to call it a purse dog. It was so tiny it fit in her purse. And so she ended up agreeing to have lunch with me one time. And I was shocked because her words were, the Zalos are pure evil. And I said, Rianne, why are you saying that? She said, I'm telling you they're pure evil. And I said, tell me why. She said, well, when I got the call to tell me that Lindsay was dead, I knew before they even told me how she died that the Zalos had killed her. And I thought, oh my God, okay. why are you telling me this? But she wouldn't. She told me that police had been following her for almost a year after the murder. She could barely leave her house without one cop being at her workplace or leaning against her car and waiting for her to intimidation. And she was going out with Vid, the bad guy, for a while, and but not for long. I think it was a very short period of time because Vid had only recently broken up with his ex. So it wasn't long, but a lot of people thought, oh, wait a minute, Vid was her ex. No, she was a beautiful girl, inside note, and I think, and she was terrified. You could see her shake sometimes and always looking around her, and she was fearful. I haven't talked to her in a couple of years. I don't know where she is, but I hope she's well.
How would you describe her relationship with Lindsay leading up to the months before her
I think
homicide?
she was very close with Lindsay. I think there's pictures of her and Lindsay being at a Halloween party in 2007. They were very close.
Did she make any indication that she was concerned about Lindsay's safety before the homicide?
Lindsay's what?
Did she make any indication to you that long before the homicide itself, that she was that she was concerned about Lindsay's safety?
Well, she just said that Lindsay was leaving him, and she said, "I think it's a good thing that she does. She got to leave. And we all wanted her to leave him. Apparently, most of Lindsay's friends did not like him, and I heard that from other parties as well."
The last time you spoke to Rianne, has her views changed? Have they evolved?
I haven't spoken. She's kind of gone underground. I wouldn't be surprised if she's changed her name. I know the police know where she is, but they're not saying.
Before we leave Rianne, and the statements that she made to Gail, I do just want to stress that we don't know the Zalos are in fact evil. We don't know they're the ones that killed Lindsay, obviously innocent until proven guilty. But Gail, this is what Rianne told you, and you are repeating it here. And I just wanted to.
It may be that Rianne believed that in the beginning and then found out later she was wrong. I don't know. There's people that say, well, she quit the Remax office the very next day and never went back. And they're saying she must be guilty. She was seeing Vid and she quit. Well, maybe she was guilty because she was terrified to go back to that office. Can go either way, can't it?
Well, I would lean with probably being scared to death of working in an office where one of her colleagues was just brutally stabbed to death, and very good friend, not just a colleague. So again, she may have been dealing with some emotions when she made these statements, or she may have some rock solid evidence. We don't know here on Cold Red for sure.
She may have been guilty of something. I just don't believe it. I just believe it.
That's fine.
But the police hoarsely.
Did Rianne ever provide any observations to you about Lindsay, that she felt pressured or she felt threatened or she was unusually anxious? Any of those type of behaviors?
Just anxious to get out of the relationship. Didn't like the expensive gifts that Jason had given her at Christmas, was giving them back. And it was really odd because the Zalos went on that Christmas, New Year's holiday in 2007 to Whistler. And, of course, Lindsay was with them, which was surprising because she was planning on leaving Jason. Then she comes back and she does a complete turnabout. She's going to give it another try. And the interesting part was, it gets so complicated, is because the Zalos had Ziggy Matheson, that drug dealer, on the holidays with him because he was good friends with Jason and Ryan. And drug dealer who had been charged with murder and got off. Drug dealing, beat women, he did it all. And they're holidaying with this guy. And I'm thinking, okay, nobody gets it.
And Jim could probably attest to this, in the hundreds of interviews that we've done, when we interview someone and we hit a sensitive spot that someone is reluctant to talk about, they'll usually let us know, or their body or the behavior will let us know. Did you encounter that with Rianne about areas that you tried to discuss that she was reluctant to talk about? Like, hey, look, I really don't want to talk about that, or I don't have anything to say about that. That kind of raised you up a little bit?
She would clam up. She was living in Coquitlam, just the outskirts of Vancouver for a while. And she called me up one day. She wasn't getting along with her boyfriend. She said, I got to get back to Victoria now. Can you come pick me up now? And I said, now? She said, now, I said, I can't pick you up now, but I'll pick you up first thing in the morning, which I did. I picked her up and I took her back on the ferry with all her furniture or everything she owned, my car stuffed. The girl was shaking, I'd never seen anything like it. She was just trembling and crying. And I thought, this is just so the ordinary. And I wondered later, did someone scare her, threaten her? Why did she go back to Victoria? I dropped her off at Mom's house. She was still shaking and scared. And as I drove away and said goodbye, she said, you didn't hear this from me because it came from so-and-so, I won't say who. But she said, Cirilla Lopez called the hit. And I'm going, it just got more bizarre as it went along. Because Cirilla Lopez was the uncle of the Dalksar brothers. And I thought, why did she tell me that? And what's that got to do with Zalos?
Well, now, for our audience, can you expand on exactly what you're talking about that? Because they may not remember the backstory here. Can you kind of go into that a little bit more, Gail? Who she was and what her relationship was with the Zalos, if there was one at all?
Rianne?
No, not Rianne. The person that you said called the hit.
Cirilla Lopez?
Yes.
He was the uncle of the Dalksar brothers. He was a big-time drug dealer. Still is, in fact. I think he's in prison in Korea now. They got him last year, 2 years ago. And he's just been convicted in Korea. Very little about him. But yeah, he was a drug dealer who sold drugs all across Canada, right to Toronto, back and forth, and taught his nephews, the Dalksar brothers, everything they knew.
What was his relationship with the people in Saanich? Or was he affiliated with groups in Saanich or individuals in Saanich?
I don't see any affiliation with him and the Zalos, but then again, they all knew each other.
Well, let me follow up with that a little bit with younger people and their social circles. Lindsay grew up in Calgary, correct?
No, Victoria.
Victoria, okay. How long had she been living in Saanich before she was murdered?
She never lived in Saanich. She lived in Victoria.
Okay, which is a suburb, more or less?
She grew up in Saanich, you're correct, with her parents, yes.
Okay, I guess her father later moved to Calgary. Okay, Jeff. What I'm trying to piece together is, again, talking about victimology. I'll just stick with girlfriends for now, women friends of hers. Were these friends that she brought with her from her past, or were most of the girls, including Rianne and others you mentioned, were they like a new group that she just met, and she met these other women through these somewhat shady characters with whom they were hanging out? I'm just trying to get a picture how the social dynamics worked here with the women involved.
Lindsay's mom told me that Rianne was Lindsay's oldest and dearest friend. Mind you, if you talk to some of the other girls, they were all Lindsay's best friend. So everybody thought they were her best friend, and she probably had a lot of besties. Some of the girls, there was 3 girls that spoke on the news one time, Czech News, I believe it was. 3 girls. They went to school with Lindsay, elementary school. And so she had a lot of high school friends and elementary friends. And then she had her real estate friends. Lindsay was working as an realtor's assistant at Remax before she ever got her license. And so she worked in the Camosun office, and she knew a lot of the realtors there because she'd come and go when she was working for a particular realtor. So she got to know them. So it wasn't new to her when she started in real estate. She already knew some of those people. So most of her friends just were nice group, nice bunch of girls. There was no gangster girls she was hanging out with. It was a nice group of girls.
And this social clique, if you will, I don't mean that in a negative sense, but that predated meeting Jason and some of the other unsavory characters that we've been hearing about from you. So, and did Lindsay sort of bring these other girlfriends into this sort of new social circle, and one's dating this guy, one's dating that guy?
Yes. Yes. And they didn't like Jason, was my understanding. Some of them did not like him.
So there weren't any other females or
was going to break up with him.
So all these women you mentioned, they were not like existing girlfriends of some of these bad actors. They were almost all brought in with Lindsay.
They were her elementary school friends or high school friends.
Okay.
They were a nice bunch of girls, all of them.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, was there some other, gun moll or drug moll or someone that didn't like Lindsay and she was already a part of the group of some of the badder elements of this extended group? And they said, hey, I heard Lindsay did this, that, the other. It sounds
Only
like none of her grade school
yeah,
girlfriends would turn on her. I'm just wondering if some other woman did.
I can think of. I saw it. There's no girlfriend that would have had it out for Lindsay that I could see.
So whatever information the killers or whoever put up the killers got about Lindsay having done or seen or said something, it didn't come from this group of girlfriends. It came from somewhere else, another guy. And it seems like there's no other women that I'm hearing of that would have been part of the original group of some of these drug dealers. Her girlfriends were all long-term friends of hers, and that means the threat and the the accusation of whatever Lindsay did wrong came from outside that group. And these other bad guys probably kept all her girlfriends, that coterie of young women, out of the inner circle, so they would never even hear that much. They can have suspicions, but not necessarily hear too much more about who may have killed her. So, okay, that does explain her social circle better. And the Venn diagram has a very small, shaded in area in the beginning, or I should say in the middle of where her social group lies, and the new ones that were ultimately responsible, no doubt, for her death.
Yes.
Gail, here is a little something that has been eating at me about this case. And it goes back to the uncomfortableness of Lindsay in showing this property to these two people. She was very uneasy, as though she felt it didn't seem right. Something was wrong, which leads me back to the point you interviewed a lot of young women that were kind of tied into Lindsay. At any point, did any of them describe any noticeable behavioral changes in Lindsay leading up to the weeks of her murder?
I wasn't close to Lindsay's friends. I don't know. I've only talked to maybe two of them, a couple of their parents I've talked to, but no. And I don't think I don't think Lindsay had a clue. That's why I don't think it could have been the Calgary drug bust either, because if she knew about that bust and she had any part of it or thought she was being pointed the finger at, she would never have stepped inside that house and she would never have gone to that appointment, would she?
So there was no fear on her part. She wasn't more secretive about things. I guess a little bit based upon what her father told Jim and I, the fact that, hey, Dad, I saw something that I shouldn't have seen. So a little bit more secretive there because he asked her what that was. And she says, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And then I'll tell you. And I don't even know if she was distracted, but it just seems that her uneasiness she was excited about showing this property, but at the same time, she was very uneasy about it. And my
But
question is,
that was a month before, though, that she was telling this to her dad, and it was 6 weeks later when she was showing the house. And I think whatever Lindsay feared, something happened in that 4-week period, probably.
absolutely.
I think this young girl was so young and inexperienced, she didn't know how to navigate this problem that she had come across. She didn't know how to deal with it. And my guess is she shared it with a friend, because I can't even imagine a young girl not sharing a deep, dark secret like that with someone. And usually
Right.
it's close girlfriend.
I agree. So,
Yes.
so
Would have told somebody.
with that said, Gail, based on your knowledge of this case over the last 16 years, who do you believe had a shared perception of who Lindsay trusted the most out of all her friends?
So I could pick a couple of girlfriends or one, two in particular that I think she would have shared with, but I'm certainly not going to say it.
No, but I mean, there are friends that you believe that she was very close to and that she trusted the most?
Yes.
Everybody does. I mean, everybody has that close circle.
Would have told her girlfriend. She may have been afraid to tell her dad. Maybe she was scared what he'd do. He could have gone a rampage and gone after whoever, and she didn't want him to know.
Did those girls, were they the ones that went into the police station after she was killed.
Yes.
And they lost that opportunity.
I bet there was a lot more girls than I know that. I only know of the 4. I'm sure there was a lot more. But obviously those 4 were 2 that cared very deeply.
And this was her inner circle for years. If she did tell one of them something deep and dark and problematic and criminal related, we would like to think they would not have purposefully told one of their boyfriends or one of the other hanger-on guys, but maybe even accidentally drinking one night, who knows, it slips out, they say something, and that starts the ball rolling. Wait, Lindsay said that? Lindsay saw that? And that is what, whatever, 4 weeks, 6 weeks later, whenever that information was learned, that they decided to take her out. Of course, we're talking about girlfriends. Would she have told, we know she was thinking of breaking up with Jason, whatever this information was, would she have shared that with him?
It's very possible, because obviously maybe she still thought that things were okay with him and she could share it. Maybe whatever she found out, and maybe we'll get into that next week, because I think maybe that will unfold. Whatever she found out, maybe she told Jason, who told his mother, which...
In your looking through this case and talking to hundreds of people and a lot of people contacting you, did anyone ever report to you that Lindsay was involved in an unusual encounter with somebody, or that she was meeting with people that were suspicious to them, or even having strange conversations before her murder?
Not once. Never.
Not once.
Never.
So is it possible, or were there indications that Lindsay's carrying a burden that she wasn't sharing with everybody? Did people say that?
Yeah, it's very possible she was carrying a burden and afraid
Well,
to
I'm not
tell it.
saying it's possible. Did people notice that? Were people cognizant of that?
That I don't know. That only what Rianne said, that Lindsay was so nervous, so anxious to get out of the relationship, and she wanted to give those Christmas presents back because she just didn't want them. Yeah.
So, in your estimation, was there more going on in that relationship than Lindsay was willing to reveal?
Could you say that
In other
again?
words, with all these things going on and her very anxious to get out of this relationship, did people tell you,
just to be clear, with Jason,
did people tell you that they believed that she knew more, or there was more going on in that relationship than she was willing to discuss or reveal?
No, they just felt that she never really got over Matt, and she just didn't want to stay with Jason. But I'm sure there was far more to it. We know there had to be.
This is a reminder, Matt was the former boyfriend.
That was the former boyfriend. And I must say, I admire Matt McDuff, Lindsay's former boyfriend. That guy has been there from the very beginning. He went on Dateline. He didn't have to. They've been split up for a year and a half. He went on Dateline, just like Lindsay's friend Nikki did. I mean, those guys were brave. That took a lot of courage. And Matt McDuff, Lindsay's boyfriend, went on the walk, old boyfriend, went on the walk several times in a row. He was there, whereas Jason never was. But Matt went there, and he also brought his parents on occasions, and his brother and his wife. And I talked to Matt's mother one time. They love Lindsay. She'd been part of their family for 5 years. So they were dedicated. They were brokenhearted. So,
and just to be clear, Matt was not part of this other circle of Jason and his buddies and some of these drug dealers, et cetera, right?
Matt, well, I think they all knew each other, through parties, nightclubs and stuff like that. Matt was not part of the Zalo group.
Okay.
At all.
Okay. I'm assuming he was interviewed by the police, but they didn't identify anyone else, so I'm sure he was ruled out too. And it's after a year and a half. And the behavior describing post-offense behavior is not consistent with someone who would have committed that murder. And we know that there was a couple that met her, and this was an this was a intensive setup and well-planned setup. This wasn't an ex-boyfriend just getting upset one night and doing something. This was well-planned, well-coordinated, probably put together in 4 to 6 weeks, and didn't even want to use a gun. They just wanted to keep it quiet and use a knife.
But if they 4 to 6 weeks earlier, then it couldn't have been the Calgary drug bust because that didn't happen until January 16th.
Okay. Well,
So I don't know.
maybe 4 to 6 days then. I don't know. And this is what we can ask some questions next week and maybe drill down with some more of this.
We got a couple of minutes to cover the day Jason was released from the police station. That evening, he called up his friend who lived in the same building that him and Lizzie did. Lindsay and Jason lived in 218 68 Sanchez. This fellow, Chris Schwartz, lived on the 4th floor. He was a major drug dealer in Victoria. Jason called him and said, "Can I come over? I need to talk to you." This is at 9:30 at night. So this is through emails received that we have. And so Jason goes over there. Chris's girlfriend answers the door and she says, "Hi, Jason. I'm so sorry to hear about Lindsay." He goes, "Yeah, thanks." She said, absolutely emotionless. And then him and Chris go out to the balcony for a half an hour to talk. Like, what is he doing there? His girlfriend said at 10 o'clock at night. His girlfriend was murdered the night before. Well, Chris Schwartz was a drug dealer. He was connected to the HA on the mainland, the Hells Angels. That's where he's got a supply of drugs. And Chris was also connected to Ziggy Matheson, another drug dealer who was connected to the HA on the mainland. Well, Jason introduced Chris Schwartz to Ziggy Matheson when Chris moved from Vancouver over to Victoria. And Jason didn't want Chris buying his drugs from the HA on the mainland. He wanted Chris to get his drugs from Ziggy Matheson, which Chris did for a time. But then Chris and Ziggy Matheson had a falling out, so Chris went back to getting his drugs on the mainland. So what's Jason doing at 11 o'clock, at 10 o'clock tonight, going up to Chris Schwartz, the drug dealer's house, a prolific criminal with a long record? Now you could say, well, maybe this is all made up. None of this is true, even though it's all documented. Anyway, Lindsay's dad, Jeff, was over in Victoria a couple months ago, and he called up Chris Schwartz. We never thought that Chris would speak to him. Chris had turned his life around. He was working. He said, "Jeff, I'm in my office. Come on over for coffee." Total shock. So Jeff went over, had his visit with Chris Schwartz, and Chris confirmed everything that the girlfriend had said in a letter years ago, that's what happened. And he said that basically Jason was worried that the chain might be coming for him next.
Hells Angels.
Yeah. Like, does that mean Jason didn't know what happened and he was worried the HA had done it or coming for him? Or did he know and he was worried they're coming for him next?
Yeah, this,
Jim,
go ahead, I just want to say, so many wide elements of this spider web, all in that Victoria area. Go ahead, Ray.
I think if we have a couple minutes to go here, I wouldn't mind diving into a couple audience questions, if that's okay. I can throw one out, then you can throw one out if you're good with that.
Sure.
All right, let me ask you this. These come from our audience, and although this is not live right now, it's being recorded. These were questions that came in anticipation of you coming on. But one of the questions were, during your 16 years of researching this case, what discovery surprised you the most?
Nothing surprises me. There were so many shockers, like, oh, no, not this, not that. This, oh, come on, can't be. Like, nothing shocked me the most. Well, maybe one thing, but we could get into that next week, and that would be information I've sent you that we haven't little deep to get into right now, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do.
That, to me, might have been the biggest shocker of all next week.
Okay.
You know where I'm going with that?
I sure do.
Okay.
I sure do.
Ray, if you have the other question, why don't you just ask it?
Anything about that has totally never been made public.
Okay. All right. Here's another question for you. What's the one question you've never been asked about this case that you wish someone would ask?
You can say that's the question.
You could do that.
Say it again.
What's the one question you've never been asked in this case that you wish someone would ask you?
Don't have an answer to that. What's the one question?
All right. How about...
You think it asked me why I'm still sane after 16 years, because really I'm probably not sane. Why would I be here? after 16 years, you know?
All right. Well, how about this? We'll do this. It'll be the last one. What single unanswered question keeps you awake at night in this case?
Who conspired to murder Lindsay? I personally not really overly concerned who murdered her. I want to know who planned it, who conspired, who was evil enough to do this to her. That's what I want to know.
You know, you're not the Lone Ranger there, Gail.
And I'm not going away. I know the police would love to see me disappear. I've been interviewed by the police twice, 2 hours each time recorded. They don't tell you anything. They just take all your information. I imagine some of it goes in the nearest waste paper basket by their desk. I don't know. But I'm not going away. I'll keep my blog going for as long as I can and just adding information as it goes. And if I get sued one day, I'm going to say, bring it on, because you know what? Let's call all these people that have emailed us, sent letters, phoned, conversations with me. I'll be glad to see them in court. What we need is a big round table conversation. We need 50 people that are all involved. I got their names all here. Everybody that's connected, you know, all Lindsay's friends, all the criminals that I talk to. Let's just have one big round table and here come the judge.
Well, with that said, and we're going to let Jim take us out here, the next chapter in this case is a brief look into part 3 for next week. That's the next episode with Gail. We're going to shift our focus towards the execution of the crime itself. And Gail will shed a lot of light on that for us. Jim?
Yeah, no play on words here, but the crime itself was an execution. And that's tough there. Yeah, a lot of names were thrown out, folks, and, you know, innocent until proven guilty. We appreciate Gail letting us know what she's heard over these years, what she's read, and, you know, take it all in, and let's see if we can somehow, you know, with next week's episode, put this thing together and get some kind of resolve on it. So again, please subscribe to Cold Red Podcast and follow us on Cold Red Podcast social media platforms. Check out our blog at coldredpodcast.com. Thanks to Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, Rick Schilling, our music coordinator. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Cold Red, coming back with Gail, as a matter of fact. Until then, stay safe, be aware of your surroundings. It might just save your life. Everyone, thanks again for listening. See you next time on Cold Red.